It's the Pillowcast with Lane McCullum. If you've got friends, you better call them. This podcast exists for absolutely no reason. Yeah. It's the only thing worse than federal treason.
Hello, all you pillow people. Welcome back to another episode of Pillowcast. We're back with a movie review today. We're back with another movie review discussion, whatever you want to call it. And along with the movie discussions, coming back, we have Landen again. Landen's here again.
Sleep paralysis demon. Hey.
Yeah, the sleep paralysis demon himself, Landen from the CBO.
We should get the sleep paralysis demon on an episode.
We will eventually, one of these days.
Amari Evers, I know you're not watching this, but if you happen to be, you better come on the podcast.
Yeah, that's why we're putting it at the beginning, so that if he sees it, he will watch like a minute of it and he'll know.
Yeah, he's in the first minute of the episode.
And we're starting this episode off really funny, but this is low-key gonna be like a sad fucking episode because the movie that we're talking about, I'm gonna say up front right now, was one of the saddest movies I've ever watched. One of the most like emotionally demanding films I've ever watched, in a good way though. And what film is that, Landon? What are we talking about today?
We are going to be talking about The Elephant Man. I would also agree it is one of the most devastating movies that I've ever seen. David Lynch has kind of just a way of making everything he makes really, really sad. Like, this is not a new occurrence for David Lynch. Everything, like, he's made quite the films that tug on your heartstrings.
No, absolutely. Like we talked about in the Eraserhead episode, a lot of his films delve into the human condition pretty heavily, and this one might be the top of the cream of the crop when it comes to that. In all honesty, we're kind of doing this in order. I don't know if this is a coincidence or not, but we did Eraserhead last time, which is Lynch's first movie, and now we're doing Elephant Man, which is the second one. So I don't know if we ever talk about more David Lynch movies. I don't know if we're going to continue that order. We might not, because if we were to do that, then we would have to talk about Dune next, and I don't know if we're that excited.
I'm open to watching Dune. Why not?
I am too.
I'll be open to fucking doing it. We'd need to watch it like at least twice though. So like it would have to be the episode probably after the next.
Yeah, no. Usually I watch these movies like twice before I do them.
I'm open to it though. I haven't watched any of the new Dune movies. I don't know if that's gonna mean anything at all. But I'm open to watching the David Lynch one.
I mean, I think his was the first adaptation, so I think that's like where you could start anyway with Dune, regardless. So I don't think it matters too much.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a possibility. If you're a Pillowcast fan, there is a possibility. So
if you're a fan of the '80s Dune movie, there's a possibility.
Yes, if you are one of the very few fans of the '80s Dune movie, there is a possibility.
So yeah, before we get into the movie, there is a lot of background regarding the movie that I feel like is important. Since the movie is based on real events and everything, we kind of wanted to go into the background a little bit of who Joseph Merrick was as a person before we got into just the adaptation of who he was in the movie. Technically, The Elephant Man is a biopic based on the life of Joseph Merrick, also known as The Elephant Man. And doing research on his life after watching the movie, I'll add a little tidbit about the movie before I get into this, but because I feel like the movie does a really good job of its fictionalized aspects really staying true to what actually happened in Merrick's life. Honestly, one of the biggest things about the movie is just the fact that some of the events are out of order, in all honesty. Some of the characters are fictionalized. That's about it, really. And even with the fictionalized aspects, the movie still gives you a really good understanding of what kind of things Merrick went through during his life. So I think overall it's a great gateway to learning more about who he was as a person, is watching the movie. It gives you a lot of that information pretty upfront and pretty accurately, even if there is some stuff fictionalized. And
I
you'll
would
see
say too. I think in general, I think the biggest thing besides the fact that it is out of order is that kind of independence, or I guess dependence in the film that Joseph Merrick had wasn't entirely how it was in reality. I would say, like, in reality, Joseph Merrick was a little bit more independent than what they framed him out to be in the movie.
Oh,
He
no,
made he
absolutely.
made his own decisions, like, pretty regularly, which is something that I don't think they included. They didn't include for, reasons they kind of wanted to tell the story a little differently. But I think in reality, Joseph Merrick was a lot more independent than what people thought when, from what you would get from the movie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And they show a lot of that stuff in the movie where he's building like the model cathedral and he loves reading and like he loves theater and shit. Like all that stuff was very independent and there are even stories about him living in the hospital in real life where he would like take daily strolls out to the garden in the backyard of the hospital and just do shit like that. So I understand why they changed it for the movie, but I think overall it's just a nice. The movie is a nice gateway to learning more about Merrick as a person and learn how things actually turned out in real life. Um, and so, on the topic of Joseph Merrick in real life, he was born on August 5th, 1862. And when he was born, he actually didn't start out with his abnormal developments when he was born. They started developing when he was around the age of 5, which was interesting to me because usually when you think of birth defects, you think that they start whenever you're born, like you come out with them. But his started to develop around when he was 5 years old. Um, his relationship with his parents was kind of interesting. His mother died when he was 11, and because of the way he looked, after his dad remarried, his stepmom rejected him pretty much, and so did his dad. So his parentals weren't necessarily in his life very much, if at all. He entered the Lancaster Union Workhouse in 1879 just for work. And it was really hard for him because of how he looked. So he reached out to a guy named Sam Torr, who was like this English comedian. He didn't like parade around like circus freaks, quote unquote. He was kind of just like he was connected with a lot of them, and Merrick pretty much asked to be exhibited as a circus freak, which is actually a pretty big detail that's not in the movie. They don't really discuss the fact that in real life, Merrick actually requested this for himself. And my guess would just be because he didn't think he could get solid work anywhere else, and he thought he could make good money being toured around because of how he looked, which is really sad, but that's how it ended up turning out. So Sam Torr turned him over to a guy named Tom Norman, who was a showman, who would parade around these kinds of people and tour them around the country. And Norman gave him the name the Elephant Man, so that's where the name of the Elephant Man comes from. He only actually exhibited Merrick for a few weeks, because the police ended up shutting it down. And I'll explain why it got shut down. It kind of comes into play a little bit, actually, very soon. So while he was being exhibited in this exhibit, this guy named Frederick Treves, who was a doctor, caught wind of him and wanted to examine Merrick because of his deformities. It was just honestly to this day, it's a condition that not a lot of people have gotten to observe. And Treves was just very fascinated by him. So he ended up taking Merrick and displaying him at a meeting for the Pathological Society of London in 1884, which is one of the most visually striking scenes in the whole movie, where they pull back the curtain and it's just his shadow. That actually did happen. That was like pretty much the catalyst of Treves studying Merrick and them starting to know each other. And a lot of people were very interested by his condition during that meeting, but they didn't really follow up on it, which is interesting because, like I said, his condition was quite an anomaly even back then, and nobody really followed up on it, which is really interesting. Treves was really the only one who wanted to continue researching it. Um, and so because of this, after Merrick was kind of shown off at this exhibit and people kind of knew who he was, um, Tom Norman's exhibit where he was parading around Merrick as a quote-unquote circus freak, it was shut down by police shortly after. This was a very common occurrence when it came to this sort of thing, so I'm not entirely surprised. Um, and then after this, he actually joined the circus from with a guy named Sam Roper. They toured Europe with this random road manager that we don't really know the name of. And this road manager turned out to be kind of a fucking asshole because shortly after he joined the circus and everything, this road manager fucking robbed him. I think Merrick had like $50 to his name and he fucking stole all of his money, abandoned him in Brussels. And this eventually led to Merrick having to find his own way back to the London hospital on his own, which is again shown in the movie, but just in a different order, because after this, after he made his way back to London, he was allowed to stay at the hospital for the rest of his life. Specifically 4 years. He stayed there for 4 years, from the time he stayed there until the end of his life. And during this time, Frederick Treves frequently visited him. They became good friends. it's not necessarily talked about in the movie, but Treves and Merrick had quite a different relationship in real life, where Merrick didn't necessarily open up to Treves as much as he does in the movie, specifically about his childhood, and a lot of that stuff that Treves actually talked about in his volume that he wrote called The Elephant Man and Other Reminiscences. Uh, a lot of that stuff about his childhood was kind of just assumed by Treves because Merrick didn't really like to open up about that. So that's a part of his life that we don't know a whole lot about because of that. But the movie does kind of switch that around and kind of makes their relationship far more tight knit than it was in real life. Although they did become very close in real life, regardless. So when he was at the hospital, funnily enough, he's at a hospital, but his condition was gradually deteriorating during the 4 years that he stayed there. And people around the hospital were pretty much just uh kind of bracing themselves for the day when he would pass, unfortunately. And eventually that did come. He passed away on April 11th, 1890 from a dislocated neck. And whenever Treves examined his body after he passed, he observed that when Merrick was alive, he always talked about how he wanted to sleep like normal people. And he came to the conclusion that Merrick tried this experiment the night that he passed, and he wanted to see if he could sleep like a normal person, which is a devastating way to die, and a devastating fact about his death is that he passed away trying to do a normal activity like everybody else, which is really unfortunate. Like I said, this is represented in the movie. A lot of this stuff is just in slightly different orders. I've said enough. The one other thing I wanted to touch on is his name, Joseph Merrick, because the volume that Treves wrote, which the movie's heavily based on, where pretty much most of the information about Merrick comes from, The Elephant Man and Other Reminiscences. Throughout the volume, Treves refers to Merrick as John Merrick as opposed to Joseph, which was his real name. And nobody knows why. Not one person knows why. I have no clue why he calls him John Merrick. Um, I had a theory where his real name was actually John Merrick, and he changed it himself to Joseph to kind of distance himself from his past struggles, which could be a possibility. I am not sure. That has never been confirmed. But Treves insisted on calling him John, and actually in some of the pages of the original volume, he had written out the name Joseph and then scratched it out and replaced it with the word John, which is really interesting, and I'm not sure why he did that, but nowadays his true name, which is Joseph Merrick, is the one that's most commonly used when referring to him. So yeah, that's kind of the background of Joseph Merrick as a person, his background, his life, and you don't have to necessarily know all of this going into the movie, just because the movie does explain a lot of it very accurately and very well. But just some background, because this Merrick was a real person. He was a real person. He went through these struggles in real life. And I just think he's a very interesting figure to learn about. And still to this day, his skeleton is on display, and medical students study it constantly. He's being very helpful even after his passing. So he's just a very interesting person, and his condition, while it didn't define him as a person, he was a lot more than what he looked like and what his condition did to him. He is still helping medical students currently, and his story is still impacting a lot of people. So whether he knew it or not, he made a huge impact on the world. And yeah, just some background on who he was as a person before we hop into the background of the movie. Yeah.
Hell yeah. So, I mean, just from that background, you can kind of tell how fucking tragic Joseph Merrick's life was. But going on to, some background about the film itself, like Lane said, originally in the book that the film had originally taken most of their information from, they called him John Merrick over Joseph Merrick. It could have just been like a fucking... I mean, I don't know how you really misremember it, but that's why if you watch the film, you're going to hear them refer to him as John Merrick as opposed to Joseph Merrick. But going into the film itself, this is David Lynch's second film after Eraserhead, and was kind of used as... Eraserhead was kind of used as leverage to even make the film. If you've seen movies like Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles and Spaceballs, this film was produced by Mel Brooks with his name detached from it for the sake of not wanting to have a comedic director attached to it for the sake of people thinking it's a comedy movie. And Lynch had recalled, he retold a story about how they had him and the two writers, I forget their names, him and the two writers for the original, screenplay for The Elephant Man had come together and wanted to make this movie. They pitched the idea, and they said, we have this movie called The Elephant Man, and David Lynch said, I want to do this. And they had pitched it to someone who knew Mel Brooks, and who eventually gave the script to Mel Brooks, and they said, the two writers, you guys are good, but who the fuck is David Lynch? He only had Eraserhead under his belt at the time, which was like a super indie movie. So, David Lynch, or not him, but someone else, he went to, I think, Warner Brothers, or maybe maybe he went to the Fox Studios to watch Eraserhead, and David Lynch's words were, "It's been nice knowing you." In response to that, or not in response, but following that, Mel Brooks came out of the theater, and ran to David Lynch and was absolutely enamored by Eraserhead. He loved how weird it was, and he thought it would absolutely work for Elephant Man, which it does. I will say, I think The Elephant Man is, in my opinion, the least Lynchian movie out of his entire filmography. I think The Elephant Man is probably the easiest one for people to get into. That's like, this isn't very weird. There's obviously, Lynch's vibes are totally there. They're definitely there, and it's very apparent. But I think it's the easiest to digest in Lynch's filmography. A lot of people will say Blue Velvet or The Straight Story. I think those still exhibit more Lynchian vibes than The Elephant Man does. I think The Elephant Man is a very straightforward story. It is what it is. People probably know about The Elephant Man, and everyone knows that Michael Jackson bought his bones. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, going on that, initially, The Elephant Man was not supposed to be this next film. The next film he was supposed to be making was Ronnie Rocket, which, after his passing, sold for, I think, about $200,000, around $200,000 at auction, the original script for Ronnie Rocket. But he couldn't get it financed. So he went in kind of with the idea of, I want to work with someone else's script, so that's where he got the script for The Elephant Man from. Also, something kind of interesting, you could consider The Elephant Man to be a member of the 27 Club.
Oh shit, yeah, that's right. He passed away at 27. I never thought about that.
So he could be like the earliest member of the 27 Club.
Yeah, one of them for sure. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So another, as I mentioned earlier, I do think Merrick was a little more independent than they made him in the movie. Well, something people don't really talk about much is the fact that he exhibited himself, kind of, because it's a lot of, when it comes to the situation in a lot of these quote-unquote freak shows, is that this is kind of the only place they can work and fit in and make any type of living, so they exhibit themselves. They go out and find these freak shows, these people with either disabilities or, some type of physical deformity. They usually seek out these freak shows because it's the only way that they can kind of fit in, which is what Merrick did. He did kind of exhibit himself, and he made that decision to, want to do that. It wasn't really like necessarily someone kidnapped him and forced him to be the Elephant Man. So I think the movie definitely puts that more as like this evil owner that kind of treats him as a slave, holds him prisoner, and but so one thing people might not know is Merrick had originally thought that his general condition came from his mother being frightened by an elephant while she was pregnant, which would explain, if you've seen the movie, in the intro, there's this weird Lynchian, it's his mom screaming, and there's an elephant, there's a bunch of elephants in the beginning, and one thing I do find cool is that when you watch the movie, the movie begins with his mother and ends with his mother. And I think that's a really cool example of, Lynch kind of using that dream logic instead of explaining everything directly. One thing also, Merrick's medical condition was never proven. There's been theories about it, and there's like a very high likelihood of what it is. But other than that, I want to get into something me and Lane are probably gonna want to talk about, the cast here. We have a pretty fucking stacked cast. One of the ones I want to bring up that I feel like not a lot of people give a lot of credit for is John Hurt's performance as John Merrick, or Joseph Merrick. it's very easy to kind of look past it considering he's behind a lot of prosthetics, but people have to understand he went through hours, I think around 8 hours of makeup, and on the first day I think it was around 12 hours of makeup,
Yeah.
and then played this character with, all this very, very heavy prosthetic.
It looks fantastic too in the movie. And actually, when I was researching just the background of the movie and everything, whenever they would do the makeup on him, it took like 8 to 12 hours, like you said. One of the quotes he said after some of the first few days of filming is he said something like, "I think these people have finally managed to make me hate acting."
Yeah,
Yeah.
that shit is excruciating. Some actors don't even like go through a shit. So I feel like, also you might know John Hurt from 1984, but people do not give enough credit to John Hurt. I do, of course. Me and Lane are very big Silence of the Lambs fans, so Anthony Hopkins in this role absolutely fucking kills it. I love this role. It's very different from anything Hannibal Lecter. If anything, it's actually the complete opposite of Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah,
Lecter
no,
is known for
yeah,
like hiding his emotions.
I love Silence of the Lambs. It is easily my favorite movie of all time, and hopefully eventually we'll talk about it on the podcast at some point because I am just itching to talk about how much I love it. But Anthony Hopkins really sticks out in Silence, obviously. But when you watch The Elephant Man, it's an entirely different character. Landon actually told me before this that he finds Hopkins' portrayal of Treves in this movie to be a better portrayal than Hannibal Lecter, and I am biased and I don't necessarily agree, but it's so close. Like it generally is so close because there are so many points in this movie where Hopkins is able to show his emotion without even saying a word. Like one of my favorite examples of this is like the first time that Treves sees Merrick in person. And he just stares, mouth open, just a tear streaming down his face with no other reaction. And it's just one of the best portrayals of emotion in the entire movie. And honestly, one of the best portrayals of emotion in any film I've ever watched. Like, throughout the whole movie, there are scenes when Hopkins is just staring blankly, and you can tell that he's contemplating what's going on, but he's not saying anything. And the scenes when he does, it just adds to the emotion of the scene. Another good one is when he's in his home and he's just sitting on the chair, and his wife comes in and she asks him what's wrong, and he kind of spills to her his internal dilemma about whether he's kind of exhibiting and parading around Merrick the same way that his handlers were when he was in the circus or the exhibit or whatever. That's a very good scene where he does that too. And throughout the movie, there are bouts where he's really happy and he's really caring and nurturing towards Merrick, and in other scenes where he's very protective of him and he's screaming and he's like beating the shit out of people. And I just think he handled so many different, a wide array of emotions throughout the movie. And it was a really, honestly, it shows the variety of his acting and how many different roles he's capable of doing.
Yeah, definitely, and it's worth noting that you can't really compare Lecter to Treves at all. It's two entirely different performances, and like I was saying earlier, they're complete opposites. Lecter is known for his absolute lack of morality or emotion, whereas Treves, that's all he thinks about. He cries and he wonders if what he's doing is right or not. And that's why I personally think that Anthony Hopkins exhibited a better performance in the Elephant Man as opposed to this. I'm just a bigger fan of his acting style in the Elephant Man. I love his emotional range, and it also is odd seeing such a young Anthony Hopkins in such an emotional role after watching Silence of the Lambs so many times. One thing I do find interesting about this film, it was released in 1980, and upon first watch, many people I don't think would guess that. It looks a lot older than it actually is.
I would actually disagree with that. I think it looks like younger than it actually is. I think it was kind of ahead of its time when it came to the visuals and everything. Like I wouldn't guess that it came out in 1980 if you told me. I would have guessed like later.
I think it's just a matter of the fact that it was filmed in black and white, and
Probably,
the fact that it's filmed on location as opposed to like some, crazy set. I think in terms of, what people have to remember is that, The Shining and Star Wars Episode 5 were already out by this point. So, in terms of, like, the cleanness of a film, I think that the Elephant Man is a little further back, especially when you look at, it's a very grainy movie. I think it utilizes, like, older cameras. It could just be the cinematographer that David Lynch picked that he was a big fan of. That I think, in my opinion, it looks older than what it is, and I think that is on purpose as a point to make it kind of a little more adapted to its time period. It's supposed to be in Victorian England, which also, fun fact, if you've seen the Johnny Depp film, the 2001 film From Hell, which is about finding out who Jack the Ripper was, the Elephant Man, who's played by someone else, also makes an appearance, which is, it's interesting because they were based around the same time. And the makeup looks very similar to the one in the David Lynch film. So if you want to see a little bit more of the Elephant Man, just literally the slightest bit more, you could watch From Hell from 2001. But yeah, so I personally, I love Anthony Hopkins' performance in this. We both do, but I think his performance in this film is better than what he does. But again, they're two entirely different roles. He's doing two entirely different things. And in reality, I think they're kind of just on par with each other. You can't really compare the two. This is just personal preference for me of like what I would keep watching over and over. I love seeing Anthony Hopkins in a serious role. He's absolutely incredible in this film.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was so interesting, like you said, after watching Silence so many times and getting familiar with just Anthony Hopkins as a person and also as a director, not a director, an actor, and then watching this movie, like those two roles alone just show how capable he is of playing a multitude of different roles. And I think those are great examples of how great of an actor he is, and he really is worthy of being the main character in this movie. Absolutely.
Yeah, so going on to the movie, one thing I did want to point out that I have in my notes here, that I find the most interesting. Also, spoilers ahead if you haven't seen. I don't know I don't know why you're watching this.
Yeah, I don't know why you're 30 minutes in and you haven't seen the movie yet. Watch the movie if you haven't first.
Yeah. Now that we're finally like fully getting into the film, one of the things I wanted to point out was this is like the reverse of the Lynchian formula when you really think about it at its roots. Because Lynch's formula has always been, from the beginning with films like, when he's doing Blue Velvet and when he's doing Fire Walk with Me and Twin Peaks and when he's doing Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive, the whole idea is taking something that seems very beautiful at the surface and very, nice, and digging deeper into finding out what really goes on beneath the surface of these places that kind of have this nice facade. The most straightforward version of this is Blue Velvet. It is literally like the film opens with red roses, blue sky, a white picket fence, and then delves into the deeper shit, what's going on beneath the surface. My favorite example of it is Twin Peaks. I love Twin Peaks. It's my favorite show in the world, and it puts on this facade of this beautiful mountain town. Everyone knows each other. Everyone's friends with each other. They all work together. But in reality, there's teenage prostitution. There's drug running. Everyone's fucking cheating on each other. It's weird shit. There's a criminal underbelly beneath all of it. And one thing I noticed is the Elephant Man is the complete reverse of that. It takes something that people would see as disturbing, people don't really want to look at, and makes it into something very beautiful. It makes it into something that you feel bad for, in a way that you want this character to succeed. And I think the best example of this is when, I forget the actress's name, but the actress in the film comes in and they recite Romeo and Juliet, and she tells Merrick that you are not an Elephant Man, you are Romeo. And I think that's
which is like one of the best lines in the whole movie, by the way.
Oh,
I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, it is. It 100% is. It's one of the best scenes in the movie. At that point in the film, literally like that, everything up until that point has just been everyone kind of shitting on Merrick, and she is the first scene we see of someone walking in. Even when you see Treves first meeting Merrick, you kind of go in with the understanding that, oh, this guy is like kind of fucked up. Like, Treves sees Merrick as a person, but also sees him not entirely. He doesn't treat him entirely normally.
Yeah, like he's a medical curiosity more than an actual human being. And
Yeah.
even then, like I feel like Treves he prays that there's some kind of person in there, regardless, because one of the standout lines in the whole movie, in my opinion, was after Treves like brings him in and like is trying to talk to him for the first time, and then Merrick is leaving on the horse buggy, and Treves is looking out the window and he's like, he's a complete idiot. Or at least I hope he's an idiot, or something like that. Because if you are a smart person and you have an ailment of that sort, you understand how people are behaving towards you. You understand how people perceive you as a person. And pretty much what Treves is trying to say is that he hopes that he's stupid so he doesn't feel that. He doesn't feel the hurt from people being antagonistic towards him because of how he looks. So I feel like even from the start of the movie, Treves has some sort of he has some sort of care in him, but he also is kind of he doesn't know for sure if Merrick is a fully functioning human being yet. And it's honestly when I first watched the movie and I had no clue about anything regarding the story of the Elephant Man or Treves, I just assumed that Treves was kind of out to get his ass. Like I assumed
Yeah.
he was not like a good guy, and when you're watching it, that is kind of a silly viewpoint because even at the beginning, he's just looking at it from a different angle. He still wants to do good. He just wants to do good in terms of like the medical aspect. Whereas later on in the film, it kind of converts into not just the medical aspect of Merrick's condition, but also wanting to get to know him as a person and treat him like he's a human being. So I feel like that whole evolution of his character throughout the movie is very well done as well.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, going on that whole scene with the actress, like Lane said, it's Treves kind of sees him as this medical curiosity, and there actually is a point in the film where Treves is kind of caught between feeling like he's helping Merrick and also just becoming an upper class, exhibitor of the Elephant Man. And like he's just showing off the Elephant Man to all these new people. So it's not, something that they were unaware of. It's very clear that there is supposed to be some kind of back and forth between how you're supposed to feel about Treves in the film. And that scene with the actress is literally the first scene where from the moment she walks in, she treats Merrick like a person. She doesn't look at him weird. She, even Treves' wife kind of treats him like this type of animal, like this pitiful thing. The actress is like the first person we see who throughout the movie consistently treats Merrick as a normal person. So I think that's supposed to, like I was going on, it's the complete opposite of what Lynch usually does. And I think that also is what makes this movie so unique and so incredible. It's a change on Lynch's typical formula, which is fucking great.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too that he did that so early, that he flipped the script so early in his career. Because this is only his second movie. You'd think he would kind of figure out a format, and then once that format is solidified entirely, he would flip the script and kind of do something interesting with it later on. But Lynch was already doing that early on in his career, like on his second full-length feature.
Yeah.
So I think that really just shows how his mind works. He was always trying to think outside the box and just really fuck with the audience and just subvert expectations constantly. That was kind of his whole thing. So it's interesting that he did it so early on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's well established by now. Lynch was fucking born outside the box. He's never been in the box
Yeah.
a fucking day in his life, which is what makes him so fucking incredible. And one thing I also want to go on about Lynch's directing in this film is he deliberately in the first few the first act of the movie, honestly, the first entire act makes it so you don't see Merrick at all on purpose.
Yeah, that was actually like one of the biggest things that I put in my notes was that you really don't get a good view of him until the maid comes up into the room to give him his oatmeal and she freaks out and shit. And that's the first time we really get a good view of his face. And I thought that was a very interesting choice. I thought that was a good choice. I feel like a lot of things regarding Merrick in the beginning of the film were kept ambiguous on purpose. Because I feel like the movie kind of wants to show you first how people view Merrick. And I think it does a good job of that because if you don't understand how people view Merrick, it's kind of hard to have empathy because even though there is if you see someone that has like a physical disability or a deformity, you're gonna feel bad for them, but it hits a lot harder as a viewer watching a movie when you actually see it occur on screen. And I feel like that whole first act is pretty much it's pretty much designed to make the audience feel empathy for him. That's the beginning of it. Because you don't see his face, you don't know anything about him as a person. All you see is just this quote unquote monster in the shadows, and he's just getting hit, and he's constantly being mistreated, and he's getting yelled at, and he's being treated as a curiosity, and he's not talking. And I feel like all of that was intentional. It was a way to kind of build up this mystique around him, but also show you how he's treated, so that whenever the second act rolls around and he's being treated like a normal person, and he's indulging himself in his interests and everything, you really get a feel for how much he's gone through. And I thought that was a really good thing in the movie. The whole first act when it comes to Merrick is pretty ambiguous and just doesn't really show him all that much.
Yeah, and like, the whole scene with Treves when he first sees Merrick, we get to see Treves' reaction before anyone else's. Like, we get to experience the Elephant Man, or we get to experience Merrick without even seeing him. We just have to take off of Treves' reaction, and also off of what we know, him being kind of like a circus act. And there's a great question that kind of lingers in my head, and it's, at what point does the audience watching this movie stop kind of gawking at the Elephant Man? At what point in the movie do you stop being like, oh, this is a weird looking dude, and start, sympathizing with him a lot more? I would argue that it's the scene where the lady drops the oatmeal, and you kind of understand that he is just really scared. But I want your opinion on that, Lane. At what point would you say is the scene where you stop kind of, wanting to, I want to see what he looks like, and you look at him and all this stuff, and then you start kind of just settling in the fact that, like, oh, this man is just a scared human?
Honestly, I do think that is one of them. I think is when the maid drops the oatmeal and he looks very scared and confused. That's definitely one of them. But I think the scene that really defines that is when Treves brings the guy in from the hospital, because they had been practicing his speech and everything, and how the whole thing is that the hospital doesn't want to keep incurables, people that can't be cured from their condition. And so this is kind of Treves trying to prove that Merrick does deserve to be in this hospital because of what he's gone through and who he is as a person. And whenever he brings this guy in, I forget his name. He has a very weird name in the film.
It's like Cargom or some shit.
Cargom, yeah, that's his name. So he brings Cargom in, and Merrick starts talking to him, and he's kind of stumbling over his words, and you can tell that he's very nervous. And Cargom leaves the kind of like, this guy shouldn't be in the hospital. I don't think he's fit to be in the hospital. And once they leave the room, Merrick starts reciting, I think it's the 23rd Psalm from the Bible, and he just starts reciting it very loudly. And at first they don't hear him, and Cargom walks down the stairs, and Treves is like, hold on, you hear him in there, right? You hear that. And they walk back in, and he's just saying the whole psalm. And Cargom is like, how, or at least I think it's Treves who's like, how do you know that? I didn't teach you that. And that's when you learn that not only does Merrick know how to speak, and he has like full thoughts, and he doesn't have to be told what to say, but he also is very passionate when it comes to reading, and also his Christian faith. He describes very heavily how much he loves the Bible, and how the 23rd Psalm is his favorite, and it's very beautiful to him. And I think that's really the first glimpse that you see into not only Merrick's physical appearance and what he goes through, but you also see just the things that he enjoys and the things that bring him comfort in his life. And you also see that he is a fully functional human being, and he's able to do things that other people can do. He's not entirely impaired of doing whatever he wants. And I think that shows a great side of humanity in him, and shows that he's a regular fucking person. He was just dealt a bad hand. I think that's the scene where, honestly, that scene and then the entire second act that follows that is just a very good representation of that. That's where I would say it starts.
Yeah, and that scene kind of goes against everything we learn about Merrick, given up until that point. We learn that, Treves tells Cargom that he's probably an idiot. There's a very high chance he might be an idiot. He doesn't talk. He only recites what Treves wants to tell him. He's always kind of... That whole scene establishes that not only is he not stupid, he's really fucking smart.
Smarter than most people, actually. Yeah, he was like
Merrick
very intellectually gifted.
Yeah, Merrick is very, very smart. And going on that note about, what me and Lane just talked about, what spawned this whole concept for me, is with you not being able to see Merrick in the first act of the movie, we become what the movie criticizes, because the entire first act of the movie, when you first watch it, you're just, I want to see what he looks like. Let me see what the Elephant Man looks like. I want to see what he looks like. And you become no better than, the circus, the people going to see him at these freak shows, and the people wanting to go see him in his room all the time. It makes the viewer no better than the people that it's criticizing in the film. And I think that it is incredible, and it's really hard to convey something like that and to successfully pull that off, and David Lynch does it incredibly.
Absolutely. And I feel like, honestly, this movie does a good job of, for lack of a better word, manipulating its audience to feel certain things. And obviously, as a filmmaker, you want your audience to feel the ways you want them to feel. That's how a movie becomes effective, is if you make a movie with emotion, you want the audience to feel the same emotion that you felt while making it. And I feel like this movie does a great job of that because, like you said, the movie puts you in the shoes of the people gawking at Merrick at the beginning. But by the end, you see the townspeople just making a fool of him, and you're like, your fists are full of anger and you're crying and shit. Like, you feel horrible for him. And I feel like it's just, honestly, I feel like all three acts are just, they're so perfectly arranged, because the first act starts off with you not seeing Merrick and you kind of wanting to see him and this curiosity built around him. And in the second act, you really get to know Merrick as a person. You get to know his passions, you get to see what he's good at, you get to just see his relationships with people that actually care about him, and you empathize with him, and nobody will ever understand what Merrick went through, but you can empathize with his condition, and you can empathize with how he's, with the cards that he's been dealt. And by the end of the movie, during that devastating third act, when it's just, he just can't seem to fucking catch a break, and he's just left stranded alone, and he has to find his way back to the hospital, and he's just struggling health-wise and mentally by the end of the movie. It's just all of that stuff that was built upon in the first two acts, like, that's when it comes into play. Like, the movie, that's where the movie really wants you to feel sympathy for Merrick, and it wants you to feel horrible for him. And I just feel like the structuring of this movie is absolutely perfect. It just, the highs and the lows are done in a perfect sequence, honestly.
Also, where the fuck were those two kids' parents?
Oh, yeah, no, where the fuck were they? Yeah, they were just kids roaming the fucking subway.
What were they doing, and where were their fucking parents to tell them to stop doing whatever the fuck they were doing?
Yeah, and why were those kids raised that way? Like, you don't comment on someone's physical appearance like that as a child, you know?
I mean, like, I understand it's Victorian England, but still, fuck yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I know the guy who handles Merrick in the circus has a different name in the movie than he did in real life, but the little kid that he has with him is even more sympathetic than that kid is. Like, and he's the one that's witnessing Merrick getting beat constantly. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why, because he sees the horrible ways that he's treated. Maybe that's why. But even then, he's still a kid, you know? Like,
yeah.
he knows better. They should too. You know, whatever.
Yeah, but, pushing aside that. One thing, going on, about what me and I were talking about, they very well could have taken the route of, like, changing the prosthetic and making him look more monstrous in the beginning so that you kind of give a different visceral reaction, and then changing how he looks. But no, Merrick never changes through the film. He looks faithful to how he did in real life.
Yeah, and they actually, I'm pretty sure for the makeup, they actually utilized some of Merrick's body casts that were done after he passed, so they could get the makeup down exactly as how he looked in real life.
It's actually I think the only time that the body cast has ever left, where it's being held, because they got to take it and actually use that to make the prosthetic.
They absolutely aced it, because if you look at pictures of Merrick in real life, some of the very few photos that we have of him when he was alive, and then look at John Hurt's makeup of the Elephant Man, like, it is honestly a spitting image. Like, even when it comes to just, like, how he talks and everything, like, obviously there's no video or audio of Merrick speaking or anything, but just the way that John Hurt talks in the makeup, like, it's believable that that's how Merrick would have talked in real life, especially since he had a lung condition and it was hard for him to move around and he would get out of breath very easy. The way that John Hurt talks in the movie, it's very believable that that's how Merrick would have sounded in real life.
And it's, again, we gotta give fucking John Hurt his flowers for this.
Yeah, no, honestly, we should just do, like, just a whole little thing talking about John Hurt's performance, because it's really, it's the bread and butter of the movie.
Yeah, he got the speech down. He had to walk with a limp, the entire time, dealing with these heavy prosthetics, not just on his face, but all over his body, having, these huge extra limbs and all the, the stuff on his back and everything. He does not get enough recognition for this role at all. The absolute work he put into this shit is insane.
Absolutely, and it's really. I feel like this is a role that could have very easily been butchered if anybody else did it, because I feel like this is an easy role to make disrespectful, because like you can have anyone limp around and act like they have a deformity on their body or whatever the hell, like someone can act like that, but it's not going to feel genuine. It's going to feel like a mockery. And I feel like John Hurt just, he fully embodied Merrick's character and his personality and just his full-on condition when it came to portraying the character, and it feels entirely genuine. Like there's no sense of disrespect, there's no sense of mockery. Like when you're watching the movie, you genuinely believe you are watching Joseph Merrick and you are watching him struggle. And generally, he not only did he put his all into the performance, he approached the performance with just a full on respect for who Merrick was as a person. And I feel like that was absolutely what was needed for the role. You can't have someone in there who doesn't understand Merrick and understand his life and understand what he went through. You have to have someone in there who's going to come in and respect the struggle and respect just everything that he went through. And I feel like John Hurt did that perfectly. Like there is not one scene in this movie where I was watching it and I felt like it was a caricature or it was disrespectful to him.
Yeah, and like even the emotional side of just, John Hurt playing an emotional character, like the scene with the actress when she comes into the room. Merrick can't really process that someone is treating him like a normal human being, and John Hurt just his emotion, absolute emotion. The line toward the end of the movie where Merrick is talking about how he's not an animal. It really is. It's so devastating. Merrick as a character is so devastating, not just because of the way he's written, but because of John Hurt's performance. So, like, again, if you haven't seen this movie, John Hurt as Merrick is fucking incredible. Honestly, probably one of the best performances in acting ever.
No, I was just about to say, I think he's genuinely one of, if not my personal favorite acting performance, just of all. And this is coming from someone who is obsessed over Silence of the Lambs and has like analyzed every little detail in Hannibal's character. When I tell you, it is genuinely, I've never felt the way I felt than I had watching Hurt play Merrick. Like it is truly a spectacle to watch. It is incredible, genuinely incredible. You feel like you are actually there watching the events unfold because he is so convincing in the role, and he just perfectly conveys what Merrick went through in his life. It is astounding to watch. But my favorite scene, probably in the entire movie, is the dinner scene with Treves and his wife, where they're kind of picking out photos on the mantle to show Merrick Treves' family and everything, and Merrick reveals that he carries around the photo of his mom, and he shares it with Treves' wife, and it's just some of the most devastating dialogue in the movie, where he talks about how he feels like he could be a disappointment to his mother, and he's just tried so hard to be a good person, and that's really the whole theme of the movie right then and there, and that whole scene is that Merrick has always tried to be a good person, and he succeeds in that regard because he is a fantastic person. There's really nothing wrong with him morally. He's a full-on sweetheart, and despite this, he feels like everyone is still out to get him, and he still feels like people are disappointed in him because of how he looks. Like he can't escape that, and that's really the whole struggle of the movie, right in that one scene. And John Hurt just absolutely sells the delivery in that scene. And what I actually learned while researching the movie is that the actress that plays Treves' wife in the movie wasn't actually supposed to cry in the script. John Hurt's performance was so emotional during that scene that she started crying involuntarily. It wasn't even in the script, and John Hurt had to actually improvise during the scene because that wasn't in the script. So that says anything about his performance in the film as Merrick. I don't know what does. Like that
Yeah.
scene right there.
Yeah, rest in peace to the GOAT, Sir John Hurt, by the way. He was.
Oh yeah, shit, that's right, Sir John Hurt, for sure.
Yeah, so shout out fucking John Hurt, bro. He is the absolute legend. Rest in peace. Also, didn't say this in the last episode, the Eraserhead episode. Rest in peace, the GOAT, David Lynch. Absolute fucking legend.
Yeah, David Lynch and Jack Nance too.
Yeah, Jack Nance, dude. There's a fucking list. We could go down the fucking list.
Like so many fucking goats related to these movies that have died.
Yeah. And yeah, going on about, the scene you were just talking about, it's one of the things I love is how throughout the movie, Merrick gets a taste of what it's like being, living as a normal person inside of a home, and he sees all the photos on Treves' mantle, and we come back to his room in the hospital, and he just has a bunch of framed photos everywhere. Photos on his nightstand, on his tables, and he takes these bits and pieces that he grabs from the outside world, the world that he wants to feel so attached to, which is very obvious because of the cathedral that he's building. He wants to feel so attached to the outside world, and so he pulls whatever pieces he can to feel just a little bit normal throughout the film, which I find incredible.
Yeah, and that's something I never actually noticed, is that because he's never had like a normal life, he doesn't know a lot about the normal traditions that people have in their life. And I never noticed that he actually started putting photos around his room and on his desk and shit after that scene. That's genuinely that's fantastic writing, honestly. Like I'm glad that they incorporated that.
And what makes it even more, that writing even more incredible, literally, like, it blows my fucking mind how someone writes something like that. That whole thing in itself is amazing writing. But then there's the scene, the very horrible scene, where there's the drunk crowd and there's the guy who works at the hospital, and they all break into his room, and them tearing down his room is not just them, it's them being horrible to him, but it's also a representation of, this was his idea of normalcy. These photos and everything he got in the cathedral was him finally working towards, oh, this is what being normal feels like. And they tear that down by treating him like the Elephant Man again. They treat him, just like a circus act, and that tears down his whole, everything he built up to try to act normal, to try to act like just a normal human being. So it's literally tearing everything down and metaphorically tearing everything down that Merrick had built for himself.
Yeah, no, and I remember watching this for the first time, and the scene it's horrible. Like it's a very well done scene, but it is just absolutely horrible to watch. In fact, when I was watching this with my girlfriend, uh,
Shout out, Jaden.
she told me after this to not, like, she told me to say this on the podcast: don't watch this movie if you are a severe empath or you feel empathy towards other people. And specifically this scene, because after the scene was over and all of that shit happened, she literally told me to pause the movie so she could weep. Like, it
Yeah.
is that emotionally powerful. But I remember watching this for the first time and just hearing the music that plays during it, where it's like this circus theme and it's just really jaunty kind of tune, show tune, whatever. And I thought it was really out of place. I was like, why would you, I feel like it would be a much more devastating song to be put in the background. But like you said, this is just an entire regression for him. Like, they are stripping away everything that he has come to know about being a normal person and turning him metaphorically back into the Elephant Man. And so when he was the Elephant Man, he was parading around in circuses and being exhibited as a freak with probably music like that playing, and that's probably the whole reason that it's in that scene. It's to represent that regression, and that they're tearing away every bit of humanity from him, and reverting him back to those days. That whole scene it's so fucking well shot, and every little thing that those people do to him, it builds and builds to just like one of the most devastating things I've ever seen. And the movie only gets more devastating after that. Like, every scene after that just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. It's the build up to that ending scene where he's screaming that he's a man and he's not a monster. It's just like, he can't catch a break by the end of the movie. It's generally horrible to watch.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to go over too is how much of a morally gray character that Treves is. It's kind of, you don't really know if Treves is exploiting Merrick or not. It's he's even conflicted. He doesn't know how to feel about it. He's not just, he's a lot more morally complicated than just like the normal, oh, he's the heroic doctor. He rescues Merrick, but right when he rescues Merrick, he's immediately taking him to a classroom full of medical students and presents him like he's an exhibit, the same way that he was before. Putting him in front of a spotlight and showing him to a crowd of people. And it's not much different than how he was being exhibited before. And so he eventually realizes that, and he wonders if he's like actually a good man for what he does. So it really is a question for the viewer on wondering is if Treves is exploiting Merrick or not. So yeah, it's one of the things that I love about this film is kind of the how you're supposed to feel about Treves, and you don't really know how to feel about him by the end of the movie. And I think that is just fucking, like, that whole the writing of Treves' character is just fucking incredible.
Yeah, generally, I feel like the writing of all the characters is just fucking perfect. And honestly, since you bring up the questioning of the morality of Treves in the movie, honestly, by the end of the movie, the only person's morality that you don't question is Merrick's. Like by the end of the movie, you know Merrick is like the most pure at heart of everybody else in that film. Whereas even Treves, you could question as being like, okay, maybe he's parading him around, even if it is unintentional, like he's parading him around and making him a spectacle, and stuff like that. Whereas you don't really question any of Merrick's intents by the end of the movie. Like you see him as nothing but a great, genuine, pure, loving guy by the end of the movie, and I just think that's fantastic. Like all of the characters that you can question them a little bit, but you can't question Merrick, and he's the one that's being like ogled at the most by everybody else in the movie.
Yeah, and you know what? One thing I did want to bring up that I have in my notes here. Do you think this movie would be better or would work the same way it does had it been shot in color?
Um, honestly, I never really thought about that. I feel like it. First of all, I think it's very interesting that Lynch decided to do another black and white film after Eraserhead. But I also feel like everything that David Lynch does is very intentional. So I don't feel like that he did the black and white as solely an aesthetic thing. I think there was probably a deeper thing to it. I never really thought about that though. Honestly, I think probably one of the bigger things is to just kind of honestly, no. I don't know why he would have made it black and white. Maybe it was to represent the time period that the movie took place in. Maybe it was to kind of draw attention more towards the characters as opposed to the scenery and the colors. Maybe that was another reason. But I really never thought about that. That's one of the things I never really questioned about the movie was the color palette. But I think the black and white works perfectly for the movie regardless.
I think in this film, the whole purpose of the black and white is, this film is very, like, it takes a lot after German Expressionism, in my opinion, like the way I see it. There's a lot of shadows. David Lynch plays with light a bunch in this film, and so it kind of controls how you see Merrick in the film. Shadows, entirely engulf his face and his body. And I think in color, the prosthetics would also not probably look as good. And people in the audience would focus on like his skin tones and the texture and all that stuff instead of the shadows and the silhouette of the Elephant Man and all that stuff. And also, I think it makes the general feel of the Victorian London. It feels, less like a recreation and more like you're seeing Victorian London. All the smoke and the steam, which is very reminiscent of Eraserhead. The sounds in this film and the look of this film, the very industrial look of this film, is very reminiscent of Eraserhead. And so I think in terms of it being in black and white, I think it's pivotal that it's in black and white. So yeah, that's the way I see it. It's you're looking at light and you're looking at shadows and shapes and all that stuff. So I think in color, it would I think it would hurt the film at some point. I think it could work in color, but it would become a different movie. I think being in black and white keeps Merrick from becoming a special effect. In a way, people are going to look at it and they're going to be criticizing, the colors and this, But when you see it in black and white, you just see the elephant. You see Merrick as the Elephant Man. You see Merrick as himself, as his own character. And I think it lets David Lynch turn him into, it helps Lynch transition him between like just a shape in absolute darkness and shadows, and then slowly turn him into a person.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot more sense to me now. I never thought about it, and I think that's a great explanation for it. And then speaking on like the visual tones of the film and everything, one thing I really wanted to ask you about was the surrealist scenes in the movie, the quote unquote Lynchian scenes in the movie, like the intro where his mom is stomped on by an elephant, or the scenes at the end where he passes away and it's the sparkly like the stars in the sky and his mom's face and everything. Like I would love to know your thoughts on that, because one of the big things that people talk about with this movie is those sequences, because they are so out of place when it comes to a biopic movie like this. Because biopics tend to be very straightforward. There's never like any sort of cutaways in that regard. There's never any like symbolism to that degree, at least. So I'm just very curious as to how you feel about them, because honestly, watching some of them, they feel like they could have just been ripped right from Eraserhead. Like, some of that shit feels like a continuation of Eraserhead. And I feel like they're very tastefully placed throughout the movie. They don't happen very often, but when they do, I feel like they add a lot of atmosphere and they add a lot of emotion to the movie.
Yeah, and one thing you're going to notice, similarly to Eraserhead, is that they both start off with birth scenes.
Yo, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so Eraserhead starts off with the birth, and so does the Elephant Man. It starts off with a somewhat kind of disturbing opening with Merrick's mother and the elephants. And we just get to see, Merrick describes her as just so beautiful, and then the elephants begin, they appear over her and around her, and they're stomping, and she falls, and she becomes distorted, and there's, a bunch of screaming, and then we go into, like, it honestly does feel like you accidentally watched the opening to Eraserhead before the Elephant Man.
Yeah,
Like,
no, they are like strikingly similar.
yeah, and so, like I said earlier, Merrick himself said that he believes that his condition had resulted from his mother being scared and knocked down by an elephant while she was pregnant. Um, and there was like a whole thing with Victorian era beliefs and shit like that, where they believed in Victorian England that like an intense experience during pregnancy could physically change how the child looked. So I think that's where Lynch got that from. And so I think it's also, kind of just taking off of, like, he just finished Eraserhead. So it's like, he's going to pull that from, what he just did. One thing, you see throughout the movie, too, is there's so much machinery. Again, it's remnants from Eraserhead, in my opinion.
Oh, genuinely, and I was gonna bring up that scene, specifically the one before the grade A douchebag breaks into his room. I forget what his fucking name is. I don't even know if they say his name in the movie, but he is just a fucking grade A douchebag, and he pisses me off. But it's like right before that where Merrick is just awake in his bed, sitting up, and it is just like a bunch of different shots of the hospital and just like machinery and shit, whereas Merrick is just like fully awake. And I love that scene because I feel like it just shows like how much Merrick has to worry in his daily life. Like he constantly has to worry about someone breaking in and beating the shit out of him because of how he looks or whatever. And so during that scene, there's very quiet scenes where it's like the hospital beds and there's the nurses caring for the patients and shit, and there's just these loud sounds of machinery and just like all of this shit going on, and it cuts to Merrick in his bed. Like he is aware of all of it. Like he has to listen for all of it because he doesn't know if one of those sounds is going to be a threat to him,
Yeah.
which fucking sucks. But I feel like that's a great representation of that. Like, there is like no second of his life up to this point where he has not had to worry about his safety.
Yeah. And going on, you asked me about the ending. I think the ending is honestly one of the most beautiful scenes in the film because you contrast it between the intro. In the intro, there's the elephants and they're screaming and it's loud and they're stomping everywhere, but the ending is, I think, a reflection on how we're supposed to feel after watching the film. In the beginning, you're kind of expecting the Elephant Man. You're like kind of scared of it. You're like, I want to see him, and you're kind of scared of what he's going to look like, and everyone's treating him horribly. And then by the end, you feel so bad for him, and that's you want him to succeed, and you sympathize with him. And so at the end, it's his mother. And there's elephants, but it's calm, and there's light, and there's peace now that he's finally passing on, and there's clouds everywhere, and it's the complete opposite. The symbols have been entirely flipped, like
Yeah, and
in entirety.
The whole foreshadowing to that last scene in the movie is genuinely incredible because throughout the whole movie, you obviously assume that Merrick doesn't like how he's been born. He hates that he's not able to be a normal person and function like a normal person. And throughout the movie, he constantly looks at this picture on his wall, this drawing on his wall of a person sleeping in their bed. Because Merrick, due to his condition and just the way that he was deformed, specifically in his head and face, he wasn't able to fall asleep like a normal person because he could potentially die from it because of how big his head was. So throughout a few scenes in the movie, when he's in his room, he's just constantly looking at this picture on the wall. And it's great foreshadowing to the ending of the movie where after the play scene, which honestly, I would love to talk more in depth about the play scene after this because it is masterful. But after that, once he starts making the bed and everything, you remember him constantly looking at that painting and it all hits you at once. It's like, oh shit, like he's doing it. Like he's doing it. He wants to finally be a normal person. He feels like he is up to that task finally. And it
Yeah,
hits you all at once. It is genuinely a devastating scene to watch. And just the way it pans from him tucking himself into the bed and then panning over to the cathedral on the desk. Like, it is just It's masterful. It is generally a devastating scene, but the way that it builds up to that and foreshadows that scene throughout the movie, it just makes it like 10 times more devastating than it would be if it didn't have those.
Yeah, and one thing that I do want to point out is the general concept of the name, even the name, the Elephant Man, and he thought that he had been, his mother was scared by an elephant, and that's what changed how he looked. David Lynch, by the end of the movie, completely takes that identity away. When we see the scene at the play, he's finally, no one's looking at him. He's just watching the play. He has the people who take care of him around him, and he gets applauded by the crowd once he's pointed out by the actress. He's not the Elephant Man anymore. He finishes the cathedral, that he finally gets to, he feels like he's finally become a normal person, and to finally separate himself from, I'm no longer the Elephant Man, he decides, I just want to sleep like a normal human being. And so by the end of the movie, once he finally passes from, when he went to sleep, he completely disassociates himself from the idea of just the elephant and the Elephant Man, which I think is beautiful.
No, that whole ending sequence is genuinely gorgeous, and specifically the scene at the play, because that's like the first time that we really see like the general public, a large group of people, treat Merrick like a human being and not a spectacle. And maybe that is just because it's a well revered actress giving her kudos to him. Maybe that's what it is. I sure hope not. I hope that people are better than that. But regardless of the context and why they are actually doing it, it is still a large group of people applauding him, standing up for him, and just showing him appreciation. And it is genuinely just, it feels amazing to watch, especially after seeing him getting deserted and being abused and being locked in that cage with the monkeys and having to make his way all the way back to the hospital. To just finally see him get recognition as a human being and not a spectacle is, it's one of the most powerful scenes in the whole movie. And even during this, like, Treves has to convince him to stand up. Like, they want to see you. Like, you stand up and let people see you. And it's like the first time in the movie he's not ashamed of himself. He feels like people actually care and they actually value him as a person instead of a monster like they had been for the rest of the movie. And that scene, it makes me cry like every time. That scene followed by the ending in the movie, it's just the most devastating back to back I've ever seen.
Yeah, but on that note, though, I do have a question for you. Do you think that theater scene at the theater where Merrick finally gets to sit with the audience and watch someone else, and for once he's actually just being able to spectate something, and they applaud him, it could be read as beautiful, but would you think it could also be read as society still putting him on display just more positively? Because as we know, especially in the modern day, people like to be very fake and very, overly nice in a very fake way to people with any type of disability.
Yeah, and actually that's why I mentioned that like the crowd's intentions aren't entirely clear. Like maybe they're clapping just because a very revered actress that they enjoy is telling them that this person is important. It's not just because they view Merrick as this important person regardless. Like they needed like a high influence to influence them to tell them that this is someone that deserves to be applauded for. And honestly, as much as I love the scene, I don't think they would have came to that conclusion on their own. Like if they were told from some random guy on the stage that Merrick deserved this applause and that the show was dedicated to him, I don't even know if they would have reacted the same way. Maybe they wouldn't have clapped for him. Maybe they wouldn't have treated him the way they did. And it
Yeah.
sucks in that it's horrible, but I just, when I think about scenes like that and just the context of that, regardless of why those people are clapping for him, I think about how Merrick would personally feel in that situation, because even though there have been points in his life where he is put on display and gawked at for the amusement of the general public because of how he looks or whatever, um the context of it is can really make a difference in that regard. I feel like that matters a lot, and I feel like Merrick genuinely in that scene felt like he was being appreciated and he was being cared about, and I feel like that probably helped his view on himself more than anything else in the film. So regardless of it, there's always caveats to this sort of thing, but I genuinely feel like it was a very good thing for Merrick, and while it sucks that the public may not have came to that realization on their own, it still benefited him, and I feel like that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Um So I think in general, I kind of went down all the notes that I have. Do you have anything else that you want to go? You want to talk about, Lane?
Um, Honestly, the last thing I really wanted to talk about was just kind of how that ending is structured, because still now, like, I've thought about the ending of that movie like every day since I watched it. Like, it is not only is it devastating to watch, but it is perfectly sequenced because it's just hit after hit of the absolute worst things happening to Merrick. Side note, actually, before I talk a little bit about it, the little guy that tries to break him out of the cage and shit, and is like, "Good luck, we're both gonna need it" when he gets on the boat. That is Kenny Baker, who played R2D2 in the Star Wars movies. He played
Oh
R2D2 in
shit!
Star Wars. Yeah,
Well,
he was in
damn,
the robot.
damn. There's like a. It's Was this before or after David Lynch was supposed to direct Star Wars?
This was before, because he was supposed to direct Return of the Jedi. So 1980, this was around when Empire came out. But
Yeah.
Kenny Baker was actively playing R2D2 while he starred in The Elephant Man, which is really cool.
Damn. Shout out
Um,
Kenny Baker.
yeah, he's a fucking goat. He's fucking awesome, and he's really cool in this movie. I like him a lot as a character in this movie. Um, and but getting back onto the whole ending of the movie, one of the scenes in the ending, actually, there's two very big scenes that stick out during this whole sequence. But one of them, the first one I want to talk about, is the circus scene where the guy that's handling him, he has a different name than he did in real life. He's a lot different of a character than he was in real life, but he seems to be just in this drunken rage, and he's really fucking pissed at Merrick, and because of his declining health, and he's just like, well, let him fucking die then, or whatever, and he throws him in the cage with the monkeys and treats him like an animal, to pretty much just thrown out there to die, and it's horrible. And then the quote-unquote circus freaks, all the people that are being exhibited along with Merrick, pretty much band together, and they're like, we need to fucking do something about this. Like, we need to get him out of here. He is just being terribly mistreated, and we need to stick up for each other. And I loved that fucking scene, because throughout the whole movie, they do a good job of showing the humanity of Merrick and showing that he is a normal person regardless of how he looks. And this is a great example of it not just being a Merrick thing, but also with anybody that is being exhibited at these circuses or these shows like that. They are all normal people with normal lives, and they enjoy normal people things. They just happen to look different or behave different, and all of these people understand each other's struggles more than anyone. So I thought that was just an incredible scene of them breaking him out of there and helping him get back to where he belonged. It's incredible. I love that fucking scene. And after that is probably the most iconic scene of the whole movie, where he is trying to be inconspicuous and get to where he needs to go in the subway, and he just becomes a spectacle. Not because he's tall and lanky, and he has this thing over his head, and he looks odd compared to the rest of the people, at least how they view him. And they corner him into this corner and take the mask off of him, and they're just screaming and they're looking like crazy at him, and he's so weak, and you can tell that he's like on the verge of just collapsing, and just like something is going to go wrong. And like in his last breaths before he collapses to the ground, he is just pleading with them to just not treat him like an animal. Like, he literally screams, "I am not an elephant, I am not an animal, I am a man." And that is, I think it's such a significant scene, because it is really the first time in the whole movie where Merrick stands up for himself. Like, in
Yeah.
all of the other scenes in the movie, he takes it. He takes the brunt of what's happening to him. When all those people break into his room, he doesn't do anything. He sits there, he lets them pour alcohol on his face, he lets them steal his photos, destroy his model cathedral, they show his own face to him in the mirror to scare him. Like, they do all this horrible shit to him, and he just takes it. He lets himself be taken back to the circus to be viewed as a freak and all of this shit. He never has stood up for himself once in the whole movie, and this is the only time where he does that, where he is finally like, guys, I am not who you think I am. I'm not a monster. I'm a human being with feelings, and you are literally making my life a living hell. And I feel like that is such a powerful moment, not only because it's great to finally hear that come from Merrick, but it is just great to hear him stand up for himself in general. With all of the stuff that Treves has done for him and everything, and everyone in the hospital, all of the stuff that they've done for him, he has come to view himself not just as someone who needs to be stared at to make money. He views himself as a human being with value, and it's gotten to the point where he is confident enough to not take it anymore. And it is, I genuinely love that fucking scene. I think it's so well shot. I love John Hurt's acting in it, and I think it is just a great representation of how far America's come in the movie, and just how much help he's gotten and how much progress he's made in kind of rediscovering himself again. It's generally one of the most powerful scenes in any movie I've ever seen. I'm sorry to go on for so long, but I think those
Yeah.
ending scenes are just absolutely fantastic, and I feel like they deserved a highlight.
Yeah, and I think what makes that scene work in particular is in opposed to whenever they could have put that in any part of the movie, and they could have put that specifically in the beginning of the film where he could be talking directly to the audience saying I'm not an animal, but he puts this after we know this already. The audience has already established their empathy for the Elephant Man. So I think putting it there, it's just like the audience knows this, but that's not helping him. Just because some people realize that he's not an animal, that's not really going to help him in this situation. There's still so many people that are treating him like he's still like a freak, you know?
Yeah, no, I think the placement of that at the end of the movie was perfect. Like you need to see the build up, and you need to learn who he is, and to see his progress as a human being to finally get to that point. And while it is a horrible scene to watch, you feel horrible for him, but you're also kind of proud of him in a sense. Like he's able to finally stand up for himself, and just no, while he's never going to be rid of this entirely, he's able to kind of push it away as much as he can. And I think it's just an incredible scene. Like there's a reason why it's the most iconic scene in the movie.
Yeah. So going on that now, since we're about an hour 20 into this episode, I wanted to ask you, same as the Eraserhead episode, what is your favorite scene? What do you rate it, and would you recommend this film?
Okay, favorite scene, as I said earlier, is the dinner scene with Treves and his wife. They're talking about the pictures. I've tried so hard to be good. Probably my favorite line in the whole movie. It's just, I think it's an incredible scene. It is generally so incredible. I feel like it really highlights the themes of the movie perfectly. But a close second would be the I'm not an animal in the subway. That scene is incredible. Generally, just a marvel. Yeah, that would be my favorite scene. Close runner up as well. Rating. I'm gonna be entirely honest with you. I think this movie is better than the Razorhead. I think this movie is not a lot better than the Razorhead, but I do think it is a better movie than the Razorhead. I would give it honestly a full on 10 out of 10. I think it is a perfect fucking movie. Lynch really upped the ante on this second film, and I think he did a great job on taking what he learned while making Eraserhead and just expanding on it. And while the movie isn't as detailed and as symbolic, and there's not a whole lot of stuff to delve into, at least not as much as Eraserhead, there is still a lot of conversation to be had surrounding it. Regardless of, like, it is, like you said, it is a movie that's very easy to understand. It's a movie that you can sit down, you can understand what's going on, but
Very emotional. A lot more emotional than Eraserhead.
oh, absolutely, yeah, no doubt. And it's I feel like if the movie wasn't done well and the story wasn't told well, it wouldn't really be as effective. Like you can have a simple story, but if you don't have the right people behind it or the right script behind it, it's not really going to do anything. Like Lynch took a script in the story that on the surface is a fairly simple story, and turned it into just this full-on character analysis of who Merrick was as a person, the things he went through, the people that surrounded him that loved him, the people that hated him, the people that looked at him and gawked at him, and just his own personal struggles with wanting to become a normal person and to break away from these deformities that have plagued his life for so long. I just think Lynch did such a great job with honestly not very much information. We have a good amount of information on Merrick, but not a ton, not as much as you would expect given his popularity as a historical figure. I just feel like everyone on board did such a good job. I feel like the performances are better. I feel like the script is better. Just everything, even the pacing of the movie, I would say is better than Eraserhead. And like I said, they're very similar in a lot of ways, but they're also very different in a lot of ways. So I feel like it's kind of weird to compare them. But I feel like just from the progression of Eraserhead to the Elephant Man, you can really see Lynch coming into his own even more as a director than on this previous one. So yeah, that's what I would say. And would I recommend this movie to someone? Absolutely, it's a 10 out of 10. So obviously, I feel like this is a movie everyone should see, regardless of if you're into Lynch movies or not, if you're into this kind of thing or not. It's honestly a story everyone needs to know. I feel like the Elephant Man story can make anyone feel something and feel empathy for, because like I've said before on this episode, nobody's really going to understand what Merrick went through entirely. Nobody ever will understand the struggle he went through. But if you care about people and you're not a selfish piece of shit, I feel like it is very easy to empathize with him and just worry about him as a person and care about his character in this film. And I feel like there's an argument to be made that this is like one of the most essential movies to show humanity in general. I just think there's a
Yeah,
lot of people out there that
definitely.
haven't seen this movie that need to see it. So yeah, 10 out of 10. Please go watch it. It's fantastic. Yeah. So yeah, flipping it over to you. What's your favorite scene, rating, and would you recommend it to someone?
So, my favorite scene in the entire film is going to be the theater scene toward the end of the movie. I think that scene is the payoff for everything that you watch in the film, all the sadness, all the, the how Merrick was treated in the film. It's him with Treves, the man who took him away from the circus, watching the actress, the one woman who treated him like a human, doing the one thing he wants, which is to not be looked at, doing the one thing that actually kept him in touch with the outside world, which was art, watching the theater. He read Romeo and Juliet, and he reads the Bible, and it's literally every single thing that he could have wanted condensed into one scene. And when you look at it on the surface, it's just, oh, he gets to go out and he gets to go to the theater, but it's so much more than that. It is literally every single piece of his life that made his life that much better put into one scene in one moment that he felt so content enough that he could have died after. And one thing I do want to point out is that after all of this, after he gets harassed and bombarded by a group of people, a mob of people chasing after him, after he got kidnapped and abandoned in Europe, after being shown off like a spectacle and beat up by the group of drunk people, at the end of the movie, he still says that he is happy. And I think that is the most beautiful part of the movie, and that part in particular, the theater part, is just the perfect way to condense how he truly feels. He doesn't feel like he was a waste of a life. He doesn't feel like, he finally got to be in peace for once, and that's why I think it is my favorite scene in the entire movie. I would also say I do think this film is a bit better than Eraserhead, but again, they are two very different movies. But I would say, yes, this film is better than Eraserhead. It's a lot more emotional. I would give it a 10 out of 10. I think it is absolutely the perfect movie. I think not only, with Eraserhead, it was if you're into film, you should definitely watch this movie. I think everybody should watch this movie. Every single person should watch this movie. It's beautiful and it's emotional and it teaches you that you should be kind to literally everyone and you don't know what people are going through. So, yeah, Elephant Man, absolutely a 10 out of 10 film.
Yeah, no, genuinely agree with everything. I love this film. Genuinely, probably it's up there in some of my favorite movies I've ever watched. Like, I need to get my grubby little hands on that Criterion Blu-ray soon. I went to Barnes
Oh,
and
yeah,
Noble a
it's
while
peak.
back, and I saw it. I was like, oh, I need that so bad. It is such a good movie. And yeah, that seems about where we would wrap up the episode. So yeah, that's the end of Pillowcast this week. Thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it. I would you want to do if we're going in order because we do plan on doing more Lynch movies, obviously. Would you want to do Dune next, and we kind of go in order from there?
Yeah, I'm entirely down. Again, we just need to watch. Neither of us have watched Dune.
Yeah.
So we'll get to it. Probably, it's not going to be the next episode for sure.
No, definitely not.
I also think we should break it up, so we shouldn't probably do a movie for the next episode. We'll probably do something else so that we
Yeah,
can,
we
break it
have
up.
we have some ideas for the next one. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So with that, I do think we probably should we'll make it a David Lynch retrospective. It'll be fun as the first series on the new season of the podcast. It's something that we both really enjoy, and it'll also give us both the opportunity to watch a bunch of new movies, and it'll be really really fucking cool. So yeah, I think I'm totally down to do next.
Yeah, fuck it. We're gonna do Dune next. That's the next Lynch movie you'll see. Probably not the next movie discussion review that we'll do, but definitely expect the Dune review in the future. And then obviously like Blue Velvet, Twin Peaks, Mulholland Drive, all of that shit. We're gonna try to cover all the Lynch movies. And yeah, just if you enjoy the episode, make sure to subscribe to Shocking Ninja Like on YouTube. That's where all the episodes are getting posted. You can go listen to them. And listen to the episodes on CBL Magazine. That's where we're hosted right now. So go ahead, go over to CBL Magazine. We're on the front page now right now. We're a big deal. Go listen to
Hell yeah.
Pillowcast. 10th episode of season 2. We're really on this shit. Fucking awesome shit. Like I said, thank you guys so much for listening. We really love making these. And yeah, just keep on checking CBL. Lots of good articles getting posted on there. Lots of good shit. Also, the Instagram is down below if you're watching this on YouTube. Our Instagram is down below, just at CBL Magazine. You can go sub to CBL Magazine on Instagram. Landen posts all sorts of good updates. You get notified when the new Pillowcast episodes come out, when new articles are posted, and when updates are going on with the website and all that. So, yeah, anything you want to say before we cut this out?
I think that's about it. We have a new article going up today. It's going to be about the Bandcamp generation. It should be either
Yeah,
up
hell
today
yeah.
or tomorrow, and it's going to be about the new generation of DIY music and people releasing music on Bandcamp, and it's going to be really, really cool. Hope you guys enjoy it. Especially Lane being an independent artist, we're trying to really delve deep into, but people of different, backgrounds and all that type of stuff. So yeah, we're going to have that coming out as our very next article. You heard it here on Pillowcast.
When you have the time and in your free time, please go and surf Bandcamp and find some independent artists to go listen to. There is so much undiscovered gold on there. So yeah, overall, that's it for Pillowcast this week. Thank you guys so much for listening. I don't know exactly what we're gonna do next week, but you will find out next week when the next episode comes out. So yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for listening. Peace out. Stay fluffy.